And if you are given a type 2, maybe look at some of the other numbers that have popped up for you and see if something else resonates more with you. And so as I went through and started looking at some of the other numbers that I was being typed as, I read type 4, and it just resonated so deeply with me. So what resonated was the sensitivity, empathy, passion, depth, and authenticity. I would say that authenticity is one of my core values in life. But what really got me were the weaknesses. Whenever I read about type 4 of envy, fear of abandonment, defense in either fiery outbursts or depression. I always tell people whenever they start taking the Enneagram that you can really resonate with the strengths, but you're going to really know your number and your type whenever those weaknesses just pierce you right in the heart and convict you very deeply. So that's usually what I try and tell people whenever they first start with the Enneagram. So here's an Enneagram overview here, and I'm going to try and breeze through this fairly quickly because I want to get to the harmonious living component of the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is broken up into triads. You have the gut triad, which is 8, 9, and 1. You have the heart triad, which is 2, 3, and 4. And then you have the head triad, which is 5, 6, and 7. Now, within the gut triad, their base feeling is anger. There is some degree of anger that they're sensing. So 8s project their anger, 9s suppress their anger, and 1s internalize their anger. With your 2s, 3s, and 4s, their root is shame. So 2s externalize their shame, 3s suppress their shame, and 4s internalize their shame. And then for 5s, 6s, and 7s, theirs is fear. So 5s internalize their fear, 6s externalize their fear, and 7s suppress their fear. So here, let's start breaking it down. 8s reflect God's justice. They are direct, authoritative, energetic, firm, but they are perceived as overly confrontational, intimidating, not open to questioning, and controlling. Then we move to your 9s. 9s reflect God's peace. They are steady, easygoing, non-confrontational, inclusive of feelings and facts, others directed, amiable, and friendly. But they can be perceived as avoiding conflict, indecisive, rambling, and unclear about their own position. 1s reflect God's goodness. They are precise, clear, direct, oriented towards right and wrong, correctness, but they can be perceived as overly detailed, judgmental, critical, limiting, or closed-minded. In your heart triad, we have our 2s who reflect God's love. They are friendly, open, expressive, focused on others, quick to support and give advice, but they can be perceived as intrusive, nagging, overly helpful, or controlling. 3s reflect God's effectiveness. They are direct, topic-focused, fast-paced, and confident, but they can be perceived as impatient, unfeeling, overly efficient, and overriding of others' views. And 4s reflect God's creativity. They are expressive of their feelings, possibility-oriented, personal, and self-focused, but they can be perceived as overly dramatic, self-absorbed, unsatisfied, or emotionally intense. And finally, our head triad. 5s reflect God's wisdom. They are content-focused, factual, clear, and analytical, but they can be perceived as emotionally disconnected, aloof, overly analytical, or distant. sixes reflect God's loyalty. They are thoughtful, questioning, information-oriented, and engaging. But they can be perceived as overly concerned, challenging, doubting, controlling, or pessimistic. And sevens reflect God's joy. They are exuberant, fast-paced, spontaneous, analytical, idea and possibility-oriented. But they can be perceived as overly quick to shift topics, self-oriented or indifferent to others' input, changeable or prone to making excuses. So the harmony triad, and what I want to focus on today is, it is this connection of your automatic intelligence with your other two centers of intelligence, even if you have undernourished or dismissed them. They create head, heart, and gut connections. So these triads are 8s, 2s, and 5s, 9s, 3s, and 6s, and 1s, 4s, and 7s. And this is a very Ignatian type of way. So St. Ignatius from the 2nd century, this traces all the way back to him. And his idea is that this is supposed to reflect the Trinitarian and harmonious nature of God, that harmony takes you from compulsive to centered, from automatic to adept, from fixation into freedom. So we're going to walk through each of these and how each type really does reflect these other two intelligences. And I love this because I love the idea that we are all balanced, that each of us really needs these other numbers in order to lead a flourishing life. That if we want to have not only a harmonious living within ourselves, but externally to see ourselves as flourishing, we need to embrace these other numbers that can really inform who we are and how we act and react in the world. So 8s, 2s, and 5s. So 8s in harmony. An 8's instinct for justice flows with thoughtfulness and compassion. Your just action rights the wrongs in ways that respond wisely to need and oppression with the intellectual intelligence of a 5, and express sacrificial love of others with the emotional intelligence of a 2. 2s in harmony. A 2's supportive care ponders what is actually helpful to others with the intellectual intelligence of a 5 and generates self-reliance rather than codependency in others with the gut intelligence of an 8. So then 5s in harmony. A beloved 5's gift of understanding doesn't stay locked up in their head. It flows with the warm engagement of others like a 2 and the decisiveness and leadership of an 8. Nines, 3s, and 6s. So 9s in harmony, a 9's instinct for unity flows with loyalty and effectiveness. Their peace initiative brings people together in ways that form alliances with the intellectual intelligence of a 6 and effectively negotiate harmony with the emotional intelligence of a 3. So then 3s in harmony, a 3's effective doing is working for the truth and good of all, which is reflected in the type 6. And is self-forgetful and mediating like a type 9. So then 6s in harmony. 6s act with effective tranquility. Their trust of themselves and channeled caution and skeptical questions in ways that completely and effectively defend and support the truth, like a 3, and serve the common good through peaceful action, like a 9. And then 1s, 4s, and 7s. In harmony, a 1's instinct for making things better reflects creative openness and awareness of nuance with the emotional intelligence of a 4 and considers how to make this enjoyable and life-giving to others with the intellectual intelligence of a 7. Fours. In harmony, a four's beautiful creativity responds with the free-spirited enthusiasm of a 7 and the stable, persevering discernment of a 1. So then 7s in harmony, a 7's gift of joy flows with groundedness and compassion. Their optimism is balanced by a perseverance and stability as seen in a type 1, and the depth and ability to hold life's pains like a type 4. So the resource that I've used for all of this is Spiritual Rhythms for the Enneagram. It is a handbook for harmony and transformation. I highly recommend this book. It has a plethora of spiritual practices. There are scripture passages in here that talk about the different types. There's always an Ignatian practice that has to do with tapping into your creativity or a specific prayer that might have to do with your type. And it also talks about how do we best love other types, which I have found to just be tremendously helpful. Because while I know how I can be loved, how do I best love other types can be a little bit challenging because I might not necessarily understand another type. So I'm really grateful. So for example, my brother is a type 6. And my triad does not cross into type 6. And so it's taken a while for us to really discern how do we best love each other, with me being so sensitive and emotional as a 4 and him being so in his head as a 6. How do we connect with each other? And so there have been ways in which when we're both present with each other that we try to have intentional conversation and make sure that it's not just surface level, because both of us need that depth. Both of us need the ability to connect with each other. His loyalist need meets my depth of conversation need. So that is my presentation that I have for you. We're right at 10:20 thereabouts, so I've stuck within the time frame.
Rachel, a lot of people might not have any clue about what an Enneagram is. And so when you were telling your numbers, they might just be going, okay, whatever that means. So how can they find do you have a way they can find out what their number is if they're not familiar?
You can literally go into Google and type in free Enneagram test, and something will pop up where you can take a test. To discern what your number is. So Ennea means 9 and gram means figure. So that is this figure right here that I have on the right-hand side of your screen. And all of these arrows indicate where do you move in strength and where do you move in weakness. But what I appreciate about the triad is even if a number is counted as your weakness, you can still draw from their strengths and allow it to balance you out in a variety of ways. So while my mother is a type 1, in weakness, she moves towards a type 4 and becoming overly emotional, very dramatic. She can still take some of those aspects and elements of a type 4, maybe the more positive components of a type 4, such as a 4's sensitivity, a 4's authenticity, and adapt those into her own daily living. So that's what I really appreciate about these harmony triads. And there's an example of the harmony triad there on the right-hand side of your screen. So again, it connects all of these numbers together.
Well, I happen to know that I'm a 1, and that means that I'm the perfectionist, and I'm also work from the gut. So my response to things is anger. So that's something that I have to constantly remind myself that I'm being stressful, and it comes across as anger. And I think it's coming across as being very efficient. So, I think finding out who you are is extremely helpful. And the funny thing is, in the group that we've been doing at church, you feel like you're talking in code. You go, well, as a 4, that's probably what you're doing. Or it's obviously that you're an 8. But it's not a cocktail play game thing. All it does is if I understand your personality and how you're best, as you just said, and how you're best receive information, then I have a better chance of communicating well with you. And if I know that some of my behaviors are off-putting, I have to learn how to dial those back so that they don't block my conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any experience with Enneagrams that you could share?
I just Googled Enneagram test, and one of the Enneagram tests said that there's 16 personality types. Another one said that there's 9 personality types. So is the 10 a consistent number, or are there different variations?
So you want to look for the 9 types. So Ennea means 9 and gram means figure. So You're specifically looking for the 9 types.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I've taken an Enneagram workshop before, and I too am a 4.
Wonderful.
But I remember when I so wanted to be something else, to be like a 7, or there was a number that I think it was a 7, because the 4 was like, oh God, it's so full of pain and and this longing but then, and what I've loved about this too is looking how, for example, focusing on God's creativity. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I identified so much as a 4, because I'm intensely emotional. I feel, deeply, and I can go to pain pretty quickly. But also, I think what I appreciate about the 4 is the desire to connect and to find the beauty. So it was interesting. I mean, I love this stuff. So like I said, I at first I wanted to be anything but a 4. Mm-hmm. But then I found the such gratitude in being a 4. Mm-hmm. And I love the idea of how we're connected. To be balanced, the 1, the 4, and the 7. So there's a 7 for you.
There it is.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my experience with it. I have a book on Enneagrams, but I don't have this one that you recommended, Rachel, and I look forward to getting it. So thank you.
Wonderful. You're so welcome.
So I think it's interesting. I don't know if we're raising our hand or if we're just blurting out.
Blurting out.
I'm an 8. I'll blurt out. I am an 8. But I think it's interesting to look at the new triad, the harmonious triad, that then those numbers draw from each of the other triads, the gut, so that it balances us. But then there's we're also related to our wings. We're also related to the numbers on either side of us. Mm-hmm. And for me, one of the beauties of the Enneagram, even though I understand myself as an 8, I know that I just move into situations and take over. I get it. But it also helps me. I'm secure in that the Enneagram reflects the wholeness of God. So really appreciated when you went through the numbers and said, this reflects God's justice, this reflects God's wisdom, because all of us are related to most of the other numbers one way or the other. We have something from each triad, we have our wings, and we have our primary way of functioning in the world, which is a learned behavior. It's become instinctive, but it's a learned behavior. So I find great comfort in the fact that we can be a lot of those numbers. We learn from each of those other numbers. Not a question, just a comment.
I appreciate that very much. I think that is so true. yeah, how we are all in different ways reflective of God, and how we draw in these other numbers, and that we're not just reflective of one version of God, we are reflective of a multitude of God's, and sharing God's wisdom and discernment and energy and creativity and joy. I love that very much so.
We're going to go into small group here shortly. So if you have general questions about the Enneagram, I'm going to give you a heads up that we have 3 questions for you to reflect on. And one suggestion was that as we go into group, maybe maybe if you're, I don't know how we do this, but each group would get their own question out of the 3. But the 3, if you go to your chat, on the side of if you go to your chat screen, one of the questions is, how do we look in harmony? What does harmonious living look like in my daily living? What does flourishing look like in your daily living? Also in that chat area, I'm sorry, those questions I just sent to Rachel, so I have to send it to everybody. Also over there, we have the some sites for you, alchemyworksevents.com. That's prayers for the 9 Enneagram types. And Winona began our session today with her type 7. And the book that Rachel just described was Spiritual Rhythms for the Enneagram. I had that in one of your emails, but that's also listed. And let's see if I can figure out how to change the questions so that everybody sees them.
I can do that, Terry.
Okay, would you?
Yep.
Thank you. There you go. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So before you go into group, if you have any questions about what you're going to be talking about, or you don't feel ready to discuss, and you might want to ask Rachel some questions, please feel free before I do the magic.
Can you just give me a brief overview of what you mean by harmonious living? Do you mean living without stress, living with recognizing our stress, living with knowing how to respond to stress, how to respond to others? What is harmonious living to you?
So I guess I would describe harmonious living as, how do you feel your gut, your head, and your heart are all working together? That can be, if you know your specific numbers, then how do you sense those specific numbers working together? But more than anything, how do you find harmony with your thoughts as they race, with your heart and the depth of what you feel, and the gut in which you have your instinct? How do these 3 things align for you? How do you listen for those, especially if one might be stronger than the other? So that's probably how I would define harmony, is looking at those sort of 3 centers of us, and which one do you lean more towards? Which one is it harder for you to listen to? How do you keep these 3 balanced?
Thank you. It would have been hard for me to talk about it without having that grounding.
Absolutely.
Someone speaking? Okay, I'm going to, we have 22 participants. So 422 is what?
This is louder.
Sorry.
Let's see if this works.
Hey, welcome back.
Welcome back.
We made it.
I'm always so excited. My goodness.
Well, we're just really, really happy that you all are here. This is our 3rd year, and there's 22 ladies here this morning. There were 24, I believe. And, I'm just delighted by that. And I'm very grateful to Rachel for sharing her experience with the Enneagram with us. So what we'd like to do now is ask somebody who was in room 1 if you would speak to us about like what you learned in your breakout room. Like what did you discuss? What was your takeaway? If somebody from group 1 would share that.
How do we know what group number we were in?
I was in group 2, so I'm not sure who was in group
I was
two.
in room 1. The 8 was in room 1. I don't know. Rosie, do you want to talk about it? So we had about 6 in our group, and only 2 of us had a lot of any experience at all with the Enneagram. So what we talked about wasn't so much those 3 specific questions, but rather how the Enneagram is or isn't like the Myers-Briggs, and how the Enneagram can tell us primarily something about ourselves, the learned behaviors that we have that have worked for us. But Rosie made the excellent point that it helps us understand others. We don't want to label others. I don't want to look at Rachel and the first time I see her say, oh, there's a 4. She's going to say there's an 8 when she sees me because that's but there's a 4. But it helps me to understand that if she doesn't come to a decision as fast as I do, if she doesn't have a firm and unshakable opinion, whether it's wrong or right, that I understand that she approaches things differently. So we kind of more talked about the Enneagram itself. And the other important thing was that how we relate to many, many numbers. So even after we feel that we're resonating with a certain number, that we draw from the other numbers in good and bad ways. And Rosie called it, she felt like sometimes she had a multiple personality because she resonated with so many things around the Enneagram, but understanding that reconciling those and that understanding that those are all a part of who we are brings some harmony to who we are.
Thank
you. So that's group 1.
Thank you. Jamie, would you like to share?
Sure, I'd be happy to share. Thank you. We did not assess, individually for the most part, what we are on the Enneagram. I know those of us who are now part of this class will certainly go in and learn more about themselves, but we did not actually discuss what we were when we shared. But what we did share were some of the very important pieces in the Enneagram. And so among those were becoming the very best we can be, appreciating our connection with others. And we even went so far, our connection with nature, but particularly noticing the joy in our lives, the joy in our living our lives to the fullest, the joy in our connection with others, and also learning how to deeply appreciate ourselves. Those were the things that I found we came away with. Thank you, Winona.
Thank you, Jamie. Miss Lynn Sarar, would you like to tell us a bit about what your takeaway was?
You're getting back at me for putting you on the spot in so many situations at work, aren't you?
I am so grateful that you are here this morning. So much. Thank you for being with us and sharing your hope and strength.
This has really piqued my interest because, as I told Barbara and Peggy and Rosie, I don't have any background in this. And I asked the question, how does this relate to Myers-Briggs? And it really doesn't. And I think the way you guys are communicating with each other is so positive and joyful, and it's made me want to know more because I think you guys in that group have really been putting it into practice. So thanks for including me.
Thank you so much. Okay. Is there somebody who is in group 3 who would like to share? I'm not sure who was in the third group. So if you weren't in my group and you weren't in Rosie's group, would somebody from that group like to share?
I was in that group, but I was waiting for somebody else to say yes.
Okay.
I told you, you go.
There were two of us who were sort of new to this. I was completely new to this. And then Tony said she was new to it. And so we didn't deal with the questions, and the Myers-Briggs thing came up only very briefly passing through as one of the other models for looking at personality types and stuff. But I think what we talked about was how valuable this can be in looking at ways that one seeks harmony. I said the last 2 years for me, and Michelle shared that for this year for her, this has been a tough time because of injuries that have gotten in the way of our living our lives in the regular way we do it. And seeking harmony for me has been difficult. And I found this presentation really valuable because of my profession and background. I look at stuff like head, heart, and gut all the time. But as my own person, it's really hard for me to pay attention to trying to draw it all together. And this is a really nice model to help guide bringing it together. If anybody else in my group wants to add anything to that, please do.
Yeah, when we were talking about the injuries, it was really just to say that we need understanding our foundation of who we are helps us to recognize and then say, okay, there is a little issue going on here, but here's what I probably need to do in order to just stay healthy in that situation. And then the other thing I would add is that because it's so subtly nuanced, all of these numbers, but with their wings and the other things that they're connected to, I really feel like you do yourself a disservice to only learn your number. You should understand all of them, because when you are in contact with somebody who's a 9 or a 7 or 4, then you can at least appreciate what it is that's happening with them, so that you can be more compassionate or helpful or whatever it is that they need at that moment. Knowing who they are is as important as knowing who you are.
Thank you, Michelle.
In the group, it was interesting because I had done Myers-Briggs. So, of course, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I know my numbers. Well, then it was very helpful to be able to see the diagram and read along with her, because each time I'd be like, I'm in that group. No, I'm in that group. No, I'm in that group. So it was, and then looking at all that crisscrossing, I'm like, oh my gosh. So it really is intriguing now that you must follow through and do to know, because it is very interesting. And I thank you for doing that. So.
Thank you, Tony. Terry, how are we doing on time? You're muted. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments they'd like to share with us about what their takeaway was?
Did we get to group 4 yet?
Okay.
We're group 5. 3 of us were in group 5.
Oh, okay. Okay. Please forgive me. I was trying to communicate with Terry, but she.
I realized I was mic'd.
Okay. Does somebody from group 4 want to share what their takeaway was?
I love for some of us from group 4 to report. My first observation was there must not have been but 3 people whose names started with K, because it was Catherine, Kelly, Karen, and then Denise. But all 3, Catherine, Kelly, and Karen, have done the Enneagram and shared what their numbers were. And I was totally out to lunch. So I got to ask questions from them, from their perspectives, and I appreciate getting to know each of these ladies a little better. So we tried to answer question 1, what do we look like in harmony? And they had great comments on that. Karen was saying fulfilled and satisfied, and Catherine said that, and Karen confirmed it, that no worries, no responsibilities. You feel like you're in harmony when you're at peace. For example, Kelly had a great visual of being outside. Things could be moving, but you felt very still. And that they educated me a lot. Kelly, is there anything, or Karen or Catherine, you want to add? Because you had great comments. You really shared.
Well, you educated me as well too, to personal harmony, like at your house. If you liked it cleaned and cluttered and somebody left something out, it's like you just do it yourself instead of expecting them to pick it up. Your harmony comes from just doing it and getting it done. I thought, well, maybe I need to practice that more at home, because my husband tells me that all the time. Well, if you want it done, do it, Karen. I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. So harmony within yourself. Sometimes you just got to do the stuff that bugs you yourself, right? At a beach really gives me harmony. Like we were talking about in our group, there's no demands on you for that moment. Nobody asking anything of you. You can just sit back and watch the waves and find harmony for that moment.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Okay. Is somebody from group 5?
Pat, are you group 5?
Yes, along with Carolyn and Debbie. And is Debbie still there? I don't see Debbie.
Okay.
But,
Would you like to comment, Pat?
Sure. Debbie and Carolyn said they had not done any Enneagram work, right, Carolyn? But I said I thought that Terry had done something with us and our siblings when we were in Texas in March. But we focused more on the harmony thing, and I'd say we didn't say it was being stress-free. It was more how we approach stress. Had to do with harmony. And I'm sorry, I don't see Debbie here, but she brought in a kind of a musical approach. She said, when things blend and they come together, and kind of that lack of dissonance, I guess, but it takes many parts and they come together. And Carolyn too talked about how she had to find her balance earlier this summer when she had an injury. So she had an injury that limited her day-to-day living, and she had to find a different mindset about that. Carolyn, you want to unmute? You want to say something?
No, I think that was pretty good. And we talked about both how to find harmony within ourselves and, with other people, focusing a lot on harmony and how it can be different given different circumstances in our lives.
Mm-hmm. But I think we're all going to take a look, at least do the free test and try to understand it better. Our interest too is piqued by this.
I've had a couple of people ask, how do you find a reliable test? If anybody has a specific address that they want to share about taking the Enneagram test, but I found most of them were fairly similar, as long as, Winona just posted it. It's a link, says, if you go to your chat, says bestenneagramtest.com. And give that a go. And when you go, and if you go to YouTube and type in Enneagram, you have a plethora of speakers that will discuss each personality type and how to choose your wings and all of that. And you can go as deep as you'd like. Every time I do any kind of more study of it, I just get another layer that I'm like, oh, I missed that part. So I think it's like everything else. It becomes a opportunity to continue to investigate and to continue your journey. And that's what we were hoping with when we started this 3 years ago with Breath of Fresh Air, that we would bring women together that were all on their spiritual journeys. And I think that Rachel has set us on one more path to check, and I really appreciate it. If anyone else has anything to say or not, I'm going to go ahead and respect your time. It's a little after 11. And
Terry?
Yes, Denise.
I was just struck as Pat was reporting the parallel between our discussion today and what Paul writes in Romans 12 about the body is made up of the different parts and each has its different functions. So it just seems to me like knowing our best functions, our best ways of interacting, and that others are different, it just seemed like there was a great parallel between that for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, Rachel, many, many, many thanks for opening our minds and opening our hearts. After we have our closing prayer, I'm going to ask you to stay back for a little bit when we close the meeting. But a lot of you came on this morning and you said, I invited somebody else. That's exactly what we're hoping. If you have friends that are not on our email list, invite them. If you want to send their email to me, I'll put them in the group emailings. And I hope we can continue to grow, because every time we meet, we learn one more thing about ourselves and each other. And I think women are all powerful, and it's our spirituality that makes us so special.
Can I say something real quick?
Certainly.
I just want to say, I'm Gina. I'm new to this, and I've never done the Enneagram, Emagram, you say it. And if anybody wants to leave, go ahead. I don't want to keep you over. But I've taken you mentioned the Myers-Briggs test, and professionally, I've taken it 4 different times. And the last time I took it was last year, and I thought, oh, I'm so different. This is different. This is different. And I'm doing this test thinking I'm going to have a totally different outcome. And the outcome was exactly the same as it was 20 years ago. So I think at the core, we're the same. It's just how we're reacting to things that changes, or what we let bother us. But at the core, I'm still the same person. It's just how I react to things or responses or whatever. So I just wanted to share that, because I thought I was a lot better than Myers-Briggs thought I was, apparently.
And you probably are.
Thank you. I'm practicing humility, but thank you.
Thank you to all of you for giving up your time this morning to join us. I hope you all carry this in your hearts for a while. I love when I hear back from you and I share it with the team. And as we come to a close, I'm not going to give you an Enneagram prayer. This is something else that I spoke to me. So let us pray. May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector for those without protection, a guide for those who've lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a bridge for those with rivers to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those without light, a place of refuge for those who lack shelter, and a servant to all in need. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I love
Peace
that.
be with
Can you
you.
share that in the
Beautiful.
email, please?
I will send that in my follow-up. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. And we will see you in November.
Thank you.